Welcome to the Chorus One podcast. In this podcast, we explore the emerging open financial system facilitated by scalable, interoperable blockchain networks. Tune in every Monday to dive deep into cutting-edge projects and protocols with Chorus One team members and guests.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming all, and thanks so much for, wonderful organizers for having me here. I'm just curious, but who here is currently staking tokens on some network? That's pretty low, 5%, 10%. Okay, great. So let's hope it's not going to be too esoteric, but I'll do my best. So first of all, just a little bit of background about me. So I've been working in the blockchain space for around 6 years. One of the things that some of you may be familiar with is the podcast Epicenter, which we've been also running for 5.5 years or something, and done 300 episodes and almost 5 million downloads at this point. I don't know, are there any Epicenter listeners? This guy. A few. About half as many as are staking tokens. I don't know what that tells about either thing. And then previously I was also working at Tendermint. So I was the first non-developer and the COO at Tendermint, which of course launched the Cosmos network. And then a year and a half ago, I started Chorus One together with Meher, and there's also some other team members right here. And we have been building validators for proof-of-stake networks. So right now we're on Cosmos, on Terra, and on Loom. And we have around 1,700 delegators and around 30 million assets at this point. And we've been focusing on a few things. Of course, there's security, investing a lot in infrastructure, things around education and governance. But what we've also spent a lot of time doing is, trying to figure out where is this proof of stake thing going, and also innovating around proof of stake. So trying to come up with maybe protocol changes that help proof of stake and the evolution of proof of stake. So that's what I primarily want to speak about today. So some thoughts and reflections about where we're at and where things could be going. So yeah, some context that I think interesting in this when we talk about that. So we've spoken with a lot of people about proof of stake, with a lot of investors, with a lot of different people working in the crypto space. And one of the common ways of looking at it has been that proof of stake is this commodity-like thing. It's very simple, right? You have some computer, some server, it's connected to a network, and it's receiving blocks, and it's signing them, and it looks pretty trivial. And that this will then become this, commodity thing where, kind of everyone is competing and the prices go down very low. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? We are seeing that to a significant extent, right? Today in Cosmos, I think the 3 biggest validators that aren't staking their own tokens primarily have all fees of 0 or 4%. So basically close to zero. And so there's a lot of truth to that perspective. At the same time, I think the experience we've had speaking with many people, at least to me, it felt like it would stop a bit too short, right? You say okay, you see basically this first step, but you don't see what's the second and the third step. And that's what basically what I want to talk about today is that evolution that I think is coming, and that's really going to dramatically transform the way proof of stake looks like, the way people will interact with it, the business models. I think everything is going to look just radically different 3 or 4 years from now. I only have very vague ideas where it may be going, so I think it's very, very difficult to predict where it's going to go, but I think what I'm pretty confident on is it will be very, very different from today. One thing that's just worth pointing out is even today, the scale of proof of stake is pretty large. So if you look at DeFi on Ethereum, and there's tons of interest around DeFi, many different people building applications. It's been an area where a lot of venture capital has gone into. But still today you have, and I think it's with some fairly generous counting of this number, but you get to around $500 million worth of value that's kind of locked in these DeFi applications. And if you compare that with proof of stake, then today you have around $8 billion worth of assets being staked. And I don't know exactly how accurate this data is, but let's say it is assuming it's accurate, then it will mean about $1 billion are paid in staking rewards every year. So this is clearly at least an order of magnitude bigger than the DeFi space in Ethereum. And of course, we're just at the beginning, right? There's countless networks that are launching. If you look here, there's just 2, Binance, okay, there's 3 of those 9 that have launched, and there's many, many more coming. So I think what we will see in the next year, 2 years, is that this proof of stake space is going to grow by a factor of probably at least 10x. So let's speak a little bit about this evolution of proof of stake and what is possible there, or how that could play out. And to do that, I'd like to take a step back and look at Ethereum and what's special about Ethereum. So I remember being in Berlin during the Web3 conference that the Web3 Foundation organized in 2018, and there was Gavin Wood giving a talk about Polkadot, and then Dennis from A16Z, the investment fund, asked him how the composability of applications will work in a world where you have many different blockchains that are trying to interoperate in some way. And when composability, what we mean with that is, if you look at Ethereum today, there are all these different smart contracts, and I can create some new smart contract that interacts with different smart contracts. And recently, I think just this week, we've had a smart contract application on Ethereum called InstaDApp that basically connects Maker and Compound, and is had this tremendous growth. And that's really easy to do, and you can come up with like really cool and powerful things on Ethereum. And in a way, that's kind of what's been driving DeFi and a lot of things on Ethereum. So if you look at proof of stake, and if you look at a world where you have many different blockchains, it seems like that same kind of innovation isn't possible, at least at the first sight when you look at it. Because first of all, how do these different chains communicate? How can you create an application that like combines things from different blockchains, so that maybe you use the tools of one chain to interact with assets on another chain, right? Like it's not really possible today. And then the other thing is that the staking assets, these 8 billion we talked about before, that those we generally think of as native to a chain. They're kind of like locked in this chain, and they can do a very limited thing. Like I can use it and I can stake it and maybe vote in governance, and that's about it. And I can't really, do much else with it. So I think what's clear is that if there is going to be, this big wave of innovation around proof of stake, both of those things have to change. First of all, it has to become possible for different blockchains to interoperate in some way. For somebody to build an application that leverages assets on different blockchains, leverages functionalities on different blockchains, and the proof of stake assets have to be able to move to a different chain, from one chain to the other. And so there are already plenty of things going on and being developed that would enable exactly that. So I think there's two primary things here. One is a protocol called IBC. There may be other protocols too that will in the future enable this kind of thing. But basically what IBC does is we have like two different chains, and it's a protocol for how these chains can send messages across to each other, send tokens across to each other, and in the future do more complicated things too, so that you have like an account on one chain and maybe some action gets triggered from the other chain. So that's one thing that's kind of needed for a lot of this innovation to happen. And then the other thing is something that we came up with, of course, together with Sunny from the Tendermint team a few months ago. It's around topics that we've been thinking about for a long time, and we built this in the Cosmos Hackathon in Berlin, which is called delegation vouchers. The idea is very simple. Like, let's say you have some staking token, and you're staking that token. And let's use Cosmos and Atoms as an example. So I'm staking some Atoms with, let's say Chorus 1. Then today, these atoms are kind of locked now. I can't transfer them to somebody else. If I want to transfer them, I have to wait 3 weeks and unbond. I can't move them to another chain. So it's very limiting. So the idea is very simple. I'm delegating now to Chorus 1, and I'm receiving another token, which we call delegation voucher, which basically just represents a claim to what has been staked as well as the accumulated rewards. And now, of course, I can take that token, and it's just like any other kind of token. I could transfer it to somebody else. I could send it to another chain via IBC once IBC is launched. And then all of this kind of innovation and creativity and applications that have become possible on Ethereum and that we think of under this DeFi umbrella, a lot of these things become possible in this world of proof of stake and in this world of many blockchains. And so that's something I think is tremendously interesting, exciting, and will really drive the evolution of proof of stake in the next years. Yeah, let's speak some examples. So let's say we have these delegation vouchers, right? So you're delegating some atoms and you're getting these vouchers on the Cosmos Hub. Like, what could you do? So one example is there's a project called Kava. Kava is basically like Maker as a Cosmos zone, as its own blockchain. And of course, for those who don't know, Maker basically works that you put up some token. Could be in traditional Maker, it's Ether. You put up Ether and you get out this stable coin. So it's a way to basically borrow money again, using your crypto and specifically Ether as collateral. So you'll be able to do exactly that, right? So now you're having this voucher representing atoms that are being staked. You could move them to the Kava zone. You could put them into this CDP, and then you could borrow this stablecoin. And of course, even though now this voucher is moved to a different chain and some actions are taking place with this voucher, the atoms themselves are still on the Cosmos hub and they're still being staked and they're still earning rewards. So that's enormously powerful. Of course, you can have many different examples that's possible of that. You could have something like Compound where you could also lend. You could, of course, move it to something like a Binance chain and you could trade them, right? So one of the big benefits of having liquidity and staking at the same time. Or you could imagine maybe a chain that's like a DAO and now it owns some tokens on another chain. Like different chains owning staking tokens of other chains could also be pretty interesting. I remember there was some article a while ago where somebody was writing, what does a hostile takeover look like in a world of blockchains? Well, this could be, in this direction, I think it could work, right? If you can have one chain buying up staking tokens and controlling staking tokens of another chain. So I think this is pretty important. So if you look at these examples, right, there is kind of different reactions to it. So one reaction is, oh, this is fantastic, this is amazing, this unlocks so many different use cases, so many possibilities, like we should do this. I would say that's probably the number one and the overwhelming reaction. But there is another reaction too, which is basically, I would characterize it as this is sort of like a fear of the unknown, right? Because now lots of things are possible and you don't know what people are going to do. Right? You could take these vouchers and you can move it to a different zone and who knows, right? People could create all kinds of weird instruments. People could maybe take a lot of leverage. There's some fear that it really create some new financial crisis, some crazy structured products. It's basically giving people a lot of freedom and a lot of possibilities and then not being able to predict where it's all going to go. And so I think that is basically a sort of a fear of isn't this going to have some negative consequences? And one important way that we think about this situation is that if you look at the things that are possible with delegation vouchers, like all of those, at least the Kava Compound and the Binance chain example, you can do all of those today already. You could build those use cases in a centralized way, right? So, and this is already happening to some extent. So, for example, if you look at the Binance chain example, the nice thing about the Binance chain example and the delegation vouchers is that you'll be able to trade atoms that are still being staked. So you can have liquidity and the rewards at the same time. Whereas today in Cosmos, you have to choose between one and the other, right? You can either keep your atoms liquid, you do not earn reward, but you can sell them, or you're staking and you're earning rewards, but then if you want to sell them, you have to wait and on-bond, and it takes 3 weeks. So how can you combine the two? Binance Chain would combine the two with delegation vouchers, but Poloniex does too. Right? Because you can basically, Poloniex can say, okay, just send all the atoms to Poloniex, we pool all the atoms there, Poloniex stakes on your behalf, and then you can trade. Now, today, this offering of Poloniex is not particularly good in that they charge a high fee and only stake a little bit, but down the line, you can expect that this would be very competitive, and if we don't offer people the ability to do this thing in a decentralized way without giving up custody, they'll be driven to give up custody, and these assets will accumulate with these centralized parties. Another example here would be something like BlockFi. I don't know if some people know that, but it's basically like a lending site, and you can put in crypto as collateral, and you can borrow, for example, fiat money or some other crypto. So you can put in there Ether or Bitcoin, and then you can borrow US dollars, or you can put in Ether and borrow Bitcoin, and it's kind of an over-collateralized lending platform. But of course, they could also say, let's support atoms, or let's support some other staking token. And now you can move that staking token over there. They can say, we're going to stake it for you, and you can also borrow some money with this stake tokens as collateral. So again, this is something that you can build today, right now, if you give up custody. And with something like delegation vouchers, it becomes possible to build that in a decentralized way as well. And so I think it's really important that we enable those things and that we're not too scared of all of the innovation and the things that people will be able to do, even though, admittedly, it is very unclear and unknown what this is going to look like and how this space is going to evolve. So that's kind of the main message here. that we wanted to bring across. So it's a very interesting space. I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation. I think we're going to basically see a sort of emerging of this DeFi space on Ethereum and the proof of stake space. Now, it could be that some of that takes place on Ethereum, that, for example, with something like delegation vouchers, people could move staking tokens onto Ethereum and using the existing Ethereum DeFi applications, or it could happen through new blockchains, independent blockchains that, are application specific, providing some kind of functionality. And with some of these interoperability technologies, as well as delegation vouchers, you can start using those and, building out those use cases. So we've done a lot of work on that. If anybody's interested, check out some of our work. If you want to learn about Course One, you can go to our website, Course.one. Of course, we would love to have you stake with us. Follow us on Twitter or join our Telegram. And also feel free to reach out via email. And one other thing, so we recently launched a podcast too, so the Course One podcast, where we have a bunch of content about this. For example, Meher and I did do a discussion of this delegation voucher idea and some of the implications of it. So yeah, also check out that and let us know what you think.
Thank you for listening to the Chorus One podcast. Visit chorus.one for more information about our work. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to stay tuned on new episodes airing every Monday.